They shut me down. I got several certified lawyer letters, saying, you can't do that. You can't be on YouTube. You can't be on here doing that. I'm like, guys, this legitimizes me as a real business, not just a TV show.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, it's pretty sharp looking.
Aaron Kaufman spent 12 seasons building Gas Monkey Garage into a household name, while Richard Rawlings took the credit. Then, one day, he just wasn't on the show anymore. He didn't have a farewell episode, nor did he explain anything at first. He simply vanished from Fast and Loud, and Discovery Channel moved on like nothing happened. So what really made the bearded wonder walk away from a hit show at the peak of his fame? And why did Richard Rawlings do nothing about it? Join us as we unveil what Fast and Loud didn't tell you about Aaron Kaufman. The kid nobody discovered. Aaron Kaufman is, by every measure, one of the most famous persons in the automotive repair world. More so because he starred in one of the most watched reality shows. But contrary to intuition, he wasn't scouted, nor was he handed a script and told to play a character called the Mechanic. Long before any camera found him, he was just a kid from Crowley, Texas, growing up around machines because that's what his family did. His father, David Kaufman, taught him to work on trucks before he was even old enough to drive one. There was a 1968 Ford F-100 on the property, and that single truck is the reason Aaron's entire career exists. At 16, he got his first car, a Jeep Cherokee, and instead of just driving it around like a normal person would, he tore it apart and rebuilt it from scratch. Most 16-year-olds want a car so they can leave the driveway. Kaufman wanted to know what made the engine tick. After high school, there was no mechanical engineering degree waiting for him. He went straight into a machine shop and learned fabrication the hard way, with almost no supervision, figuring it out through trial and error. Small shops. He did driveway builds for friends with zero glamour. At the time, he was just a guy trying to get good enough at his craft to make a living from it. That actually matters more than it seems, and it completely overturns how fans saw every episode of Fast and Loud. The show made it look like Richard Rawlings was the brains and Aaron was the muscle. But the opposite was the case. Richard was always the one closing deals, while Aaron stayed underneath the cars doing the work that made those deals worth anything. That division of labor worked for years. Then television entered the picture and changed everything. The man behind the beard. Gas Monkey Garage had already existed for a decade before cameras ever showed up. So when Fast and Loud premiered in 2012, what it did was turn a working Dallas hot rod shop into a global brand. And it turned Aaron, with his long beard and steady intensity, into the fan favorite of the entire show. Richard was the loud one, the salesman, the face people saw in every promo. But ask a longtime viewer who they actually wanted more screen time from, and the answer was almost always Aaron Kaufman. The man wasn't interested in performing for the camera. He only wanted to do the one thing he loved doing: building. The audiences could tell the difference between the two men with one glance. And so for 12 seasons, Aaron was the lead mechanic and fabricator behind some of the show's most iconic builds. Richard himself later said Aaron had been a part of Gas Monkey Garage since day one. That's something that can only be said about a founding partner and not just a co-star. Viewers genuinely believed the two had a working chemistry, but they couldn't be more wrong. With time, the cracks began to show. Within 2 months, the show became Discovery's highest-rated series. Everything looked to be going well, but what audiences didn't see was how lopsided that arrangement was once the cameras stopped rolling. One day, Aaron mentioned to producers, as a courtesy, that he wanted to shave his beard. What he, and probably no one else, expected was that the producers would give him a flat, firm no that left absolutely no room for discussion. At that moment, Aaron clearly understood how much of himself had really become the show's property rather than his own. But he wasn't going to back down so easily. He directly told them that if they wanted him to keep it, all they had to do was ask. But if they insisted on telling him no, he'd walk to the nearest drugstore and shave it on camera in front of everyone. The producers realized Aaron wasn't joking. They immediately softened their stance and asked nicely. He agreed. But things could no longer remain the same. The beard wasn't just his facial hair anymore. It had become branding, and it belonged to the show. From that point on, Aaron understood exactly what kind of arrangement he was actually in. While the beard incident was going on, Richard was nowhere to be seen. He didn't raise a defense for Aaron. He just went with the flow. Aaron still stayed. But what the show didn't tell the audience was the weight he was carrying. What Fast and Loud didn't talk about. Aaron has never been one to fear hard work. Anyone who watched the show knew that much was obvious. A person who spent his teenage years in a driveway at midnight, welding by lamplight, is not someone who wilts under pressure. But as the show gained traction, it took on a relentless pace that began to take its toll on Aaron. At the time, the man lived roughly 45 miles from the Dallas shop in Fort Worth. Whenever there was traffic, the drive alone could take at least an hour and a half each way. There were weeks when he logged over 110 hours. He would leave home before sunrise and wouldn't get back until well past midnight. When he bothered going home at all, he had to sleep at the shop on some nights in a half-built car and rinse off with a hose at the back before starting again the next morning. Aaron logged more than 1,300 hours across the first 12 episodes alone, while Richard's time on set over the same stretch came in closer to 200. And while long hours and physical exhaustion were old friends of his, what he hadn't signed up for was having his craft systematically dismantled in the name of television ratings. For Aaron, if you're going to build a car, build it right. But when the shop turned into a race against the clock, everything started to fall apart, bit by bit. At first, it seemed like a fun challenge. Tight deadlines, fast builds, and big reveals. But that wore off quickly. He once shared that during one project, they had just a few days to finish a 1931 Ford Model A, a car that normally takes months to restore properly. Instead of pacing the job and thinking through each step, they had to rush every single detail. It wasn't about craftsmanship anymore. It was about finishing something before the cameras stopped rolling. The car's quality didn't matter as long as it was finished. This was torture for Aaron, but it was exactly what Richard wanted. By 2017, Aaron made a huge decision to save himself and his career. He decided to leave Fast and Loud, and he did it in a way most fans didn't expect. Aaron started reaching out to old friends in the industry and asked about available shop spaces around Dallas. He sketched business ideas and researched equipment suppliers. He wasn't looking for another TV deal, not after what he went through. He just wanted control over his time, his builds, and his future. But reality quickly hit him with something else. He was not allowed to leave. Aaron's contract with Discovery controlled more of his schedule and public image than most fans realized. When he first asked to go, the network blatantly refused and offered more money instead, hoping that would fix things. He turned it down, telling them he didn't want a bigger paycheck. He wanted freedom and would settle for nothing less than that. And for the next few months, they kept negotiating. It was during this period that Richard found out Aaron was leaving. He later admitted he knew Aaron had been unhappy for years. When Aaron finally left, fans kept asking questions non-stop. They wanted to know what made their favorite face on the show quit. And for years, they got vague, PR-friendly answers. But when Aaron finally sat down with Art of Gears, he gave the real answer. And it's more revealing than anything Discovery ever aired. He pointed straight at one build, the eco-boosted De Tomaso Pantera. In his own words, that car was the bottom end of the type of cars he wanted to build. It became clear that the floor of what Kaufman wanted to create was already too ambitious for what a weekly cable show could produce. He put it plainly when he said the difficulty level of the builds he wanted to do surpassed what can be done on TV in time and budget. Television needs episodes wrapped in days. Aaron wanted to build cars that needed months. Rather than a small creative disagreement, that's two completely different definitions of what building a car means. And it wasn't only about ambition. He also pointed to the growing personal issues and professional differences of opinion that had been building for a while. He never said anything against Richard in public. But he made clear this wasn't a snap decision. It was a slow fork in the road, and eventually he had to pick a direction. When he left, Richard went on record saying he had nothing to do with it. Richard told reporters that Gas Monkey was stronger than ever. He said that the shop felt calmer and things were easier now. Those comments stung many fans who had come to love Aaron's presence on the show. While the TV shows came and went, one thing didn't. And that's the part that actually explains everything. Arclight Fabrication. The real reason he left. Arclight Fabrication opened to the public in 2017 in the Dallas area. It is built around one deliberate niche: classic Ford F-100 pickups, roughly the late 1950s through the late 70s. Remember that farm truck from earlier? This is Aaron building an entire company around the machine that shaped his childhood. Why F-100s specifically? Because almost nobody else was doing serious resto-mod work on them at scale. Every other shop was chasing Broncos and Chevelles, the trucks everyone already loved. Kaufman looked at an overlooked platform nobody was fighting over and decided to become the definitive name in it. It wasn't smooth sailing, though. He later admitted that becoming the boss was harder than anything he faced on television. At Gas Monkey, he focused on fabrication, while someone else worried about the business. Now every decision landed on his desk. Hiring, inventory, marketing, digital content, and even small details like tool maintenance and supply orders. Nothing moved unless he handled it. The pressure wore him down fast. His relationship with his girlfriend felt the strain, his dogs barely saw him, and employees noticed how tense he became during those early months. He knew he wasn't at his best, but he also understood the trade-off. If he wanted real independence, he had to learn how to run a company, not just build cars. In mid-2019, rumors started spreading that Arclight had quietly shut down. Enough people were asking that Aaron had to address it directly on the company's Facebook page, essentially saying, "We're still here, we just moved locations." The original shop and showroom did close, but it was a relocation, not a collapse. Was that enough to actually sink the business? Not even close. But it shows how fragile things can look from the outside when a former TV star's day-to-day stops being filmed. A shop moving locations is a Tuesday for most business owners. For Kaufman, it briefly became a rumor that he was washed up. When Aaron left Fast and Loud, he didn't vanish from television completely. He got his own show, Shifting Gears with Aaron Kaufman, which premiered in March 2018 and followed him building his new business from the ground up. Aaron chose the projects, controlled the pace, and had final say on the creative direction. The first build was a brutal off-road monster truck designed for King of the Hammers, exactly the kind of complex project networks once told him was too risky for television. Fans and critics appreciated the deeper focus and slower storytelling. even though the ratings never matched the massive numbers of his old show. After 2 seasons, Discovery moved on. Aaron didn't see it as a loss. He'd proven he could do television on his own terms, build what he cared about, and grow a business that reflected who he really was, not just the character people once saw on screen. Then came Aaron Needs a Job, a travel-style series where he explored different mechanical trades across the country. It landed a little better creatively, with more variety and more personality, but it never got picked up for a second season either. There's something about this whole story that rarely gets its own spotlight. Aaron isn't just a builder. He was more. The racing side nobody talks about. Back in 2013 and 2014, while he still worked at Gas Monkey, he got his first taste of the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, widely considered one of the most dangerous motorsport events in the world. 156 turns, almost 5,000 feet of elevation gain up a literal mountain. He built a fully custom 1963 Ford Falcon on the show specifically to race it, running a 363 cubic inch V8, pushing over 500 horsepower. He also briefly ran the Speed Energy Formula Off-Road Series and competed in 2 rounds of Stadium Super Trucks in 2015. None of it made headlines the way Fast and Loud did, but the pattern holds. Kaufman was never just performing car culture for a camera. He was actually living it when nobody was filming. Then, in 2022, he went back to Pikes Peak in a 1949 Ford F1 nicknamed Old Smoky. Same mountain, different decade, same obsession. After leaving Gas Monkey, he sold that famous Falcon on eBay for $65,000. To a lot of viewers, that car was practically a cast member. But to Aaron, it was a tool that had done its job. He's named the AC Cobra as his all-time favorite car, with a 32 Roadster close behind, which tells you his taste has always run toward raw, mechanical, old-school machines rather than flashy modern exotics. Another thing the show didn't spend much time on is Aaron's personal life. He has been with his partner, Lauren Moore, since at least 2013, and she actually appeared alongside him in a 2014 episode of Fast and Loud. While Richard's life got treated like a storyline, complete with a divorce and a very public car collection sale, Aaron kept that part of his world mostly off-screen. Reality TV usually finds a way to turn every personality's private life into content. But Aaron managed to be one of the most watched people on cable television for years, without letting the show define his relationships. When the cameras stopped rolling on Fast and Loud, his personal life didn't need any rebuilding, because it had always been intact. That leaves one question fans have never stopped asking. After everything that happened, what actually became of Aaron and Richard? Are they actually still friends? In a 2018 interview, Aaron gave one of the more honest answers a former co-star has ever given about a public breakup. When he was asked about Richard Rawlings, he said it wasn't that they had an unfriendly rapport. They just don't have much rapport these days. Then he added the line that explains everything. They're just 2 guys who built something huge together, grew in different directions, and drifted the way people do when a shared project ends. Multiple sources have confirmed they remain on friendly terms. This was never the hostile split fans kept hoping for. According to him, they saw the world differently. They had different values, different goals, and different ideas about what mattered. Fans still recognize him at car shows and ask about Fast and Loud, and he talks about it with an open heart. Even though it pushed him to his limits, the show undeniably changed his life. So, where does that leave the scoreboard? Aaron spent roughly a decade helping build one of the most recognizable garage brands on television, walked away at the peak of his fame, watched 2 follow-up shows fail to get renewed, and built a niche restomod company from the ground up, one that nearly got mistaken for dead in 2019 before proving it had just changed addresses. Estimates on his net worth vary by source, but most land somewhere between $8 and $12 million, built from his Fast and Loud earnings, his shows since, Arclight Fabrication, and brand deals, including a partnership with exhaust maker MagnaFlow. But the number was never really the point. Aaron Kaufman had the formula handed to him. Stay on the hit show, keep cashing checks, and keep being the internet's favorite bearded mechanic. He walked away from it because the work itself had stopped being satisfying. Not because he failed, not because of some ugly blow-up, because one De Tomaso Pantera build reminded him what he actually wanted to spend his life building. And television couldn't give him that. That's not the version of this story Fast and Loud ever told you. And honestly, it's a better one. Would Fast and Loud have lasted longer if Kaufman had never left? And if he ever teamed back up with Rawlings for one build, would you want to see it? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.